Blink TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Deadly clashes erupt in Egypt ahead of vote. Human Rights Watch accuses Syrian regime of committing war crimes in Idlib. And blasts rock Afghan capital hours after Obama's surprise visit. Mosaic. World news from the Middle East begins now.
The
death toll in the fierce clashes that erupted between Egyptian strikers and armed groups near the defense ministry in the capital, Cairo, has risen to 20. A group of gunmen attacked a sit-in rally that was organized against the ruling military council near the defense ministry's headquarters. Military sources confirmed that the army will intervene to put an end to the clashes. A demonstration was launched from Al-Fatah Mosque in Ramses Square in central Cairo and headed to Al-Khalifa Al-Mamoun Street in solidarity with the strikers. Meanwhile, several revolutionary blocs called for organizing a million-man march on Friday. The protesters have been staging sit-in rallies since last Saturday.
The Egyptian street continues to mobilize until all revolutionary demands are attained. The Egyptian people are continuing to counter the military's rule and its machinery. They launched an open-ended sit-in near the defense ministry's headquarters in Cairo. However, on Wednesday at dawn, the sit-in rally turned bloody. Eyewitnesses said that security forces opened fire at a group of worshippers performing the dawn prayer in Al-Abbasiyya Square. The following footage shows that a bloodbath had taken place at the square. Shots were fired directly at protesters' heads, with images of bloodstains covering the scene. Dozens of people were killed or injured by the gunfire of regime forces and gunmen disguised in civilian clothing, otherwise known as thugs. The Egyptian people vowed to continue to stage sit-ins and protest rallies until the attainment of their demands, most notably the end of the military rule and the election of a president for the republic. The protesters slammed the military council and accused it of trying to rig the election process.
The military council must leave. The military continues to ruin and burn the country. We want an elected president, not a president selected by the military council.
We don't have another choice. We will not go home until the military council is toppled. This must be done today, not tomorrow, and definitely not June 30th, when the council said it would relinquish power. They will not transfer power. They will dissolve any committee calling for their ouster, under the pretext that the committee has committed fraud. Again, they will not transfer power on June 30th.
Amid the bloodshed spilled at the beginning of the revolution and today, the revolutionaries' mobilization continues in Egypt, as Egyptians continue to hope for a better future that meets their aspirations and fulfills their dreams.
المرشحان الرئاسيان المصريان محمد مرسي وعبد المنعم أبو الفتوح علقا.
Two Egyptian presidential candidates, Mohamed Morsi and Abdel Monem Abu Fattouh, have suspended their campaign and accused the government of failing to counter the attacks on the strikes near the defense ministry. According to the Muslim Brotherhood website, the group's candidate suspended his campaign for 2 days to mourn the victims who were killed in the clashes.
حدادا على أرواح قتلى الاشتباكات وأضاف أن حزب الحرية والعدالة المنبثق عن الجماعة قرر مقاطعة.
The source added that the group's Equality and Freedom Party decided to boycott a meeting called for by the ruling military council. For his part, Abu Fattouh announced that he suspended his election campaign until further notice, in protest over the way the authorities are dealing with the anti-military council's sit-in rallies.
The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported the killing of 15 regime troops, including 2 officers, in an ambush set up in the countryside of the northern province of Aleppo. The observatory indicated that clashes in the countryside of Damascus killed 6 regime soldiers. In addition, the Syrian Network for Human Rights said 14 people were killed today in Aleppo, the countryside of Damascus, Homs, Daraa, Deir ez-Zor, Al-Qamishli, and Hama.
Over 20 regime soldiers were killed on Wednesday in the countryside of Aleppo and Damascus, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. A large number of regime soldiers and defectors were killed, including 2 regime colonels, after violent clashes during an ambush set up in Ra'il town, in the countryside of Aleppo near the Turkish border. In the countryside of Damascus, fierce clashes erupted in the city of Harasta and continued until dawn, killing a number of regime soldiers, according to the observatory. Harasta was also stormed, and an arrest campaign was carried out there. The region of Homs witnessed shelling as well, especially in Khalat al-Hussein city. In Homs city, the Al-Khalidiyya neighborhood experienced shelling and gunfire from snipers, which killed civilians. The killing of civilians occurred on Wednesday in the cities of Homs, Aleppo, Damascus, Deir ez-Zor, and Al-Kamishli, according to the opposition. In addition, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said Al-Dakhla in Deir ez-Zor was shelled, while the city of Al-Quriya was subject to a campaign of arrests and raids. Some activists' houses were burned. Parts of Daraa were also shelled. In the countryside of Aleppo, the wide-scale military operations carried out by regime forces in the past several months were partially halted when the ceasefire took effect last month. However, the operations have resumed in the last several days. At the same time, the countryside of Damascus saw similar operations, especially in the 2 cities of Douma and Harasta, according to activists. Despite the UN Secretary General's declaration that violence has declined since the UN observers arrived, their presence does not seem to have prevented the daily killing of dozens. There have only been 30 observers in Syria so far. Meanwhile, the regime and the opposition have been trading allegations of violating the ceasefire. In a related development, Human Rights Watch accused the Syrian authorities of committing war crimes in Idlib province shortly before the ceasefire took effect, killing 95 people in military operations in addition to burning and destroying houses. The report said that opposition fighters left certain areas without resistance in order to avoid endangering civilians. As for the freedom that the streets demand, it has become a slogan that these children chant, mimicking the chants of adults during their peaceful protests. Hayan Yaqub, BBC.
He came during the night and left before the break of dawn in a surprise visit amid heavy security measures described as unprecedented. U.S. President Barack Obama visited Afghanistan for 6 hours and met with his Afghan counterpart Hamid Karzai. The 2 leaders signed a strategic partnership pact for cooperation between Washington and Kabul. Following Obama's visit, Kabul was rocked by a series of explosions that claimed the lives of 6 people. The Taliban claimed responsibility for the attacks and warned they will launch an offensive against NATO on Thursday. Ana al-Haidari reports.
In a surprise visit under the shadow of night, his plane landed in Afghanistan. U.S. President Barack Obama visited Afghanistan for 6 hours and held talks with his Afghan counterpart, Hamid Karzai. The 2 leaders signed a long-term strategic partnership agreement that follows months of negotiations. Under the terms of the agreement, the U.S. will provide military and financial support for Afghanistan. The pact also outlines the relationship between Washington and Kabul after 2014. Obama addressed the Afghan and American people from Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan amid heavy security.
In the pre-dawn darkness of Afghanistan, we can see the light of a new day on the horizon as we mark the first anniversary of bin Laden's death.
أفق جديد وعد به أوباما الأمريكيين من أفغانستان
From Afghanistan, Obama promised the Americans a new day on the horizon. However, the dawn of Kabul was not very bright as smoke rising from explosion sites covered its skies, not hours after the U.S. presidential plane took off. Dozens of people were killed and injured in the bombings that targeted a housing compound for Westerners in central Kabul. Additionally, clashes erupted between Afghan police and gunmen inside an EU and UN housing compound in the capital. The Taliban claimed responsibility for the attacks, which it said were directed against Obama's visit and the signing of the strategic agreement. With this development, Afghans continue to pay what Obama referred to as the high cost of 11 years of war.
The halls of the Knesset were abuzz today with news of former Kadima chairwoman Tzipi Livni's resignation. The other hot topic in this first day of the summer session is the call for early elections, which drew a mixed response from Knesset members. IBA's Ariel Reshef was in the Knesset and files this report.
Former opposition leader Tzipi Livni appeared anxious today as she officially submitted her resignation to Knesset Speaker Reuven Rivlin. In her parting speech, Livni said she was proud that she had brought Kadima the most votes in the last election. She insisted that while she is leaving the parliament, she is not leaving public life. Livni also stood by her decision not to join the ruling coalition, a move several of her former Kadima colleagues have rejected. Was it a mistake by Tzipi Livni not to join the government?
For sure. I think Israel had a very dramatic issues to deal with, like changing the constitution, designing constitution, changing the method of ruling in this country. And we could do it if we would be in the government, the three biggest parties.
The burning question today in the halls of the Knesset was when, not if, early elections will take place. Finance Minister Yuval Steinitz told the Knesset Finance Committee that early elections won't bring more stability and that the entire electoral system should be revised. Other MKs expressed concern over the timing of the potential polling. Arab List MK Ahmed Tibi said that the Muslim holidays should be taken into account.
The date proposed by the Prime Minister, beginning of September, is not appropriate, is not suitable, especially for us Muslims, because it is very close to the end of Ramadan.
Kadima member Roni Tirosh said that her faction needs more time to generate funds and to reorganize after their shakeup in leadership.
How short we do it, it's too short because Tzipi left us short of money. And it's very difficult to go for elections without enough money.
Elections are now expected to take place sometime in the fall. Coalition members are pushing for the first week of September, while Kadima and other opposition parties are in favor of a later date to allow them more time to campaign. In Jerusalem, Ariel Reshef, IBA News.
Palestinians fired a Qassam rocket from the Gaza Strip into Israel overnight. The missile exploded in an open field in the Shaar Hanegev region. No injuries were reported. The color red rocket warning system was activated in surrounding towns. Defense Minister Ehud Barak restated the case for a military strike on Iran's nuclear program before it reaches the immunity zone, and he dismissed growing criticism that political leaders were misleading the public over the consequences of such an action. But the criticism continues, this time from former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. IBA's Eli Wagalanter has the story.
Defense Minister Ehud Barak said the international talks on the Iranian nuclear program, quote, do not fill me with confidence, and he reiterated his hardline position that all options, including an independent Israeli attack, remain on the table.
I believe that it is well understood in Washington, D.C., as well as in Jerusalem, that as long as there is a future existential threat to our people, all options to prevent Iran from gaining nuclear weapons should remain on the table, and they will. I have enough experience to know by now that the military option is not a simple one. It will be complicated with certain associated risks. But a radical Islamic Republic of Iran with nuclear weapons would be far more dangerous, both to the region and indeed to the whole world.
Iraqi Parliament Speaker Usama al-Nujayfi said the cause for the ongoing political crisis in Iraq is what he referred to as derailment from the democratic trajectory in Iraq's administration.
Al-Nujayfi added that the solution lies in adherence to the constitution, judicial independence, and the separation of powers.
The political crisis is still ongoing, and there is derailment from the democratic trajectory in the country's administration. We need to review its work and maintain adherence to the Constitution, judicial independence, and the separation of powers through independent bodies. These basic principles should be implemented in reality. There should be discussions in the Parliament, the Council of Ministers, and among the political parties to adjust the country's path.
The Ministry of Peshmerga in the Iraqi Kurdistan region's government refused to hand over heavy weaponry seized during the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. The ministry called on the Iraqi government to implement the provisions of the Joint Memorandum of Understanding signed in 2005 as a solution to the issue.
Officials close to Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki called on the Peshmerga to hand over the heavy weaponry that it looted.
As soon as Iraq's complicated internal political dilemma witnesses some changes, it returns to square one with the eruption of a new political crisis. The Kurdistan region became the center of conflict this time with a new title, the Peshmerga weapons. Those in the inner circle of the Iraqi Prime Minister began to push the issue forward and demanded that the regional government hand over the heavy weaponry that it seized during the U.S. invasion, such as tanks and armored trucks. They consider these weapons to be a threat to the country's security.
The amount of weapons they seized equals that of at least 2 divisions in the Iraqi army. Now it's time for the regional government to hand over these weapons. We believe that the Parliament, especially the Defence and Security Departments, will give the order to run an inventory of these weapons first.
The Ministry of Peshmerga is calling for implementing the provisions of the memorandum it signed with the Iraqi Defense Ministry in July 2007. The memorandum's 8 provisions acknowledge the Peshmerga forces as the guards of the region, specified its budget, and stipulated that it be armed with weapons from Iraqi infantry regiments. However, al-Maliki's government has not implemented the memorandum so far.
We agree that these weapons are what they call heavy, but they blew this issue out of proportion. At the same time, we would like to reach an agreement on how to hand over these weapons. They speak of using MiG aircraft. So where are these MiG aircraft?
In light of this controversy, Kurdish citizens believe it is the region's right to possess weaponry to defend itself. Many issues remain at the focus of conflict between Baghdad and Erbil, most notably oil, the disputed areas, and Peshmerga's weaponry and budget. It appears that none of these issues are heading towards any solution. Many obstacles are troubling the Iraqis these days, after political setbacks and conflicts have created a major security vacuum. It is feared that the war of words between Baghdad and Erbil will turn into a real battle on the ground. Ayub Rida, Al Jazeera, Erbil.
The UN Security Council has approved a resolution threatening sanctions against Sudan and South Sudan if they fail to halt violence on their border.
Thank you. The result of the voting is as follows. The draft resolution received 15 votes in favor. The draft resolution has been adopted unanimously as Resolution 2046-2012.
The resolution orders the neighbors to stop all hostilities within 48 hours and resume negotiations within 2 weeks under an African Union roadmap. The Security Council condemned repeated cross-border conflicts between the two sides, the South's capture of Idlib oil field, and Sudan's aerial bombings. It also warned Khartoum and Juba against any measures aimed at overthrowing the governments of either side. The resolution threatens non-military sanctions such as asset freezes if either side fails to comply. Fighting between the neighbors in recent weeks has raised fears of a return to an all-out war.
The current conflict between Sudan and South Sudan is on the verge of becoming a full-scale and sustained war. It poses a clear and present threat to international peace and security. Both countries are on the brink of returning to the horrors of the past and threaten to take the entire region with them. To avoid untold devastation and suffering, the fighting must stop, and stop now.
Moving on to another one of our headlines. Israeli forces have once again clashed with Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. This after people took to the streets to show solidarity with Palestinians on a hunger strike in Israeli jails. Clashes erupted near an Israeli military camp where several Palestinians were being held. Israeli forces fired tear gas canisters to disperse the protesters. About 1,600 prisoners are staging an open-ended hunger strike. Some reports put their number at 2,000. The hunger strike is against the conditions in which inmates are being held, as well as to the demand an end to detention without trial. Meanwhile, two Palestinians, Bilal Diab and Tahir Halahla, have marked their 64th day of a hunger strike. A doctor from Physicians for Human Rights has found both of them to be at risk of death. Diab has been taken to a hospital.
لمتابعة موضوع الأسرى ينضم إلينا مباشرة من مدينة بيت لحم وزير شؤون الأسرى.
Joining us from Bethlehem to discuss the prisoners' issue is the Minister of Prisoners Affairs, Mr. Issa Karaki.
عن آخر المعلومات فيما يتعلق ب
Issa, welcome. Please brief us with the latest information on the situation of prisoner Bilal, who, as we learned earlier, has slipped into a coma.
نعم يعني من على شاشة
Yes, through Palestine TV, I am sending a continual and urgent call to all human rights organizations, people of conscience, and human rights advocates in the world to intervene urgently, rapidly, and immediately in order to save the life of prisoner Bilal Diab. Last night, he was transferred to the Israeli Asaf Harufi hospital in the city of Sarafen in an extremely critical condition. His colleague, prisoner Tahir Halahla, is also in critical condition in the hospital of Israel's Ramla prison. I am saying that if anything happens to the prisoners who have been on hunger strike for over 60 days, the prisoners of change, who are Bilal, Tahir, Hassan Safadi, Omar Abdur Shalal, Al-Jafar Azadin, Mohammed Al-Taj, and the other prisoners in solitary confinement, if anything happens to them, God forbid, or to any Palestinian prisoner, it is a crime openly committed by the occupation government, disrespecting all universal principles and values of humanity and civilization. The ramifications will not remain inside the prisons, but will be reflected largely outside the prisons. Therefore, we must move fast. And the prisoners don't have more time, as they are in extremely grave condition, and the prison administration is still ignoring their legitimate demands. They are basically prisoners of administrative detention, detainees without any charge or trial. Their detainment is illegal and unlawful. This situation is deeply worrying. It has been troubling us and troubling our people. I am sending out this call in the name of the mothers of the prisoners, in the name of every free and dignified Palestinian who is now deeply troubled by this inhumane and disastrous massacre that the Israeli government is committing. So far, I say that Israel has been unresponsive to the movement, to the pressure, and to all the calls until now.
سيد عيسى يعني ما هو دور يعني المؤسسات
Issa, what is the function of human rights and freedom advocating organizations here? What are the answers you receive from them in response to your call for intervention and exerting pressure on the occupation in order to ease the suffering of the prisoners who are confronting challenges by writing a legend with their battle of empty stomachs?
في مواجهة التحديات بأمعائهم الخاوية.
Well, we received responses. There are phone calls, condemnations of what is happening, and demands that call on the Israeli government to respect the principles and rulings of international law in dealing with the Palestinian detainees. There are specific calls for saving the life of 2 prisoners, Bilal and Thair, whose health is drastically deteriorating. However, it seems that the Israeli government, despite all that's happening, is continuing its repressive and arbitrary measures, even in light of the continuing hunger strikes of nearly 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. The remaining detainees, who are the majority of the prisoners, are still waiting to hear a response to their humane and just demands in the next few days, as promised by the prison administration. If the prison administration does not respond to these demands, I believe that the scope of the hunger strike will expand and will enter a new phase which will require tremendous support locally, regionally, and internationally to bring justice to the Palestinian prisoners' cause.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.